Hi Rhiannon, hi Zen. Welcome Zen, it's nice to have you a part of Spinning Meeples. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what you are able to tell us about board games, both imports to Japan and of course Japanese games. And of course any others that might be found in the Asian market. I don't know if that's something that's more easily accessible to you there. But if so, I'd very much like to see what's available in some of the other countries. I know Korea has a big board gaming presence, and they have a couple of stands at Essen coming soon, so it'll be good to see if there's anything there as well. So last week, apart from being a welcome to Zen, which was a farewell of course to Kyle, wish you all the best Kyle with the baby, with Tina. And of course, I really hope that you carry on designing board games. Rhiannon was kind enough to show us a little bit about The Grizzled and asked the question with regards to two-player games at the end. And I think I've understood her question correctly. So the three games I want to talk about, in actual fact I want to cover 5 games in total, although 2 of the games aren't out yet, so I just want to briefly touch on them towards the end. What I do want to talk about is the 3 games I've got here. They all have one thing in common, and that is that they feature strongly the drafting mechanic. And Rhiannon posed the question, as I said, about two-player games and multiplayer games which invoke or have special rules for 2 players. And so I thought that drafting was quite interesting because theoretically it doesn't work with 2 players, because the idea is with drafting is that everybody around the table is dealt a series of cards. They choose one card, then pass their deck or their hand onto the next player, who chooses a card, and so on and so forth to make up their full complement of starting hand of cards, or tableau if they're laying them straight to the table, which is fine in and of itself if you're playing with more than 2 players, but becomes problematic when you are playing with 2 players, because obviously when you're playing with 2 players there's just the 2 hands, and so you obviously know what the other person has drawn each time, with the exception of maybe the first card, and maybe with the exception of the last card as well. So the first game I want to talk about is Anton Bauser's Seven Wonders, which is published by Repos Production. Seven Wonders is a game that doesn't do the drafting mechanic very well for 2 players. In fact, although it says 2 to 7 players on this box, the initial publication only had 3 to 7 players, and it was only when somebody came up with an alternative way to play with 2 players that they changed it to a 2-player game. In Seven Wonders you are basically drafting cards to build a civilization. You have to have certain amounts of resources on your tableau, so you draft your card and then everybody reveals what they've drafted at the same time and place them in their tableau, and there are various coloured cards which allow you to do things. What's interesting with the Seven Wonders is that as you build up your rewards, there are different ways of collecting sets, and they will allow you to develop your civilization differently, whether it be an aggressive one collecting red army cards which allow you to attack the person on your left and your right, which of course then doesn't work in a 2-player game particularly well, because obviously in a 2-player game you'll be attacking the person directly opposite you. So it's more that mechanic that doesn't work than the drafting mechanic, because there is a way around the drafting mechanic, as you'll see in the next game. So you're collecting sets of various cards and scoring them based on what you have, based on the text on the cards, and some of the cards will allow you to score points and gather victory points throughout the game. One thing that's interesting with this, with the drafting, is that you play 3 rounds of drafting, and in the first round it goes clockwise, second round it goes anti-clockwise, and the third round it goes clockwise again. It's a very, very popular game. It won the Kenneth Spieler in 2011, and is seen by a lot of people as a gateway game, or maybe the game that brought them into board gaming. I would say it's possibly just a little over gateway. Because there are some mechanics in the game which aren't great for new beginners. So the next game I want to talk about is Among the Stars by Vangelis Bagiatakis and published by Atipia Games. And whilst Seven Wonders is a civilization game set in ancient times, Among the Stars is set in space, in a completely fictional world, where you are basically building up your space station, and trying to develop that as best you can. Now, there have been a number of expansions to this, as they have with Seven Wonders, which allow for ambassadors and various other things to be included in the game. It plays similar-ish to Seven Wonders in as much as you're drafting cards and you're playing them to a tableau. There are certain rules on where you can and can't play cards in Among the Stars, and it is a bit of a table hogger. Whereas Seven Wonders, you're sliding the cards underneath your player mat. In Among the Stars, you are building a space station which gets bigger and bigger and bigger. What I like about the Among the Stars drafting mechanism is that it does allow for two-player drafting, in as much as between each player you deal an extra set of hands. So you set it up as if you were playing 4 players, but in the two-player game you will discard a card from each of the non-player decks before passing them on to the next player. So you're drafting all the time from 4 decks as opposed to from 2 decks, which keeps things nice and random. The fact that you're discarding one as well each time means that nobody's quite sure who's taken what. Among the Stars and Seven Wonders also, I wanted to point out, link directly into the 2 games which I'm not really going to cover. This is because for Seven Wonders, in October this year, they are releasing Seven Wonders Duels. Seven Wonders Duels, as the name implies, is a 2-player specific Seven Wonders game, and in that what you're doing is you are drafting cards from the table, and the only way you can draft a card is if it's completely freed. Some cards are placed face down, some cards are placed face up on top of the other cards, and you can only take a card that's face down once it's been completely freed of the cards that are laid on top of it. More about that I don't know at the moment. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens when it comes out. I think it's debuting at Spiel this year in 2015. Among the Stars has a second game that's coming out, it's a standalone, but it's also can be used in the Among the Stars game as well, and it's called Among the Stars Rivals. Among the Stars Rivals, again, is 2-player game and fits in with either you can put the cards in Among the Stars and use them there, or you can play it as a standalone 2-player game. And that has been kickstarted and should be shipping to backers relatively soon. So the final game I wanted to talk about is a 2-player drafting game. It's Tides of Time, published by Portal Games and designed by Christian Koehler. And in Tides of Time, which I mentioned in my previous video, I have since played the game and can tell you that as a 2-player drafting game, it is excellent. What happens is that at the start of the game, you deal 5 cards to each player from a deck of 18 cards. Then each player drafts 1 card and places it in a tableau and hands the deck off to the hand of cards to the other player. And he draws a card, drafts the cards, places it in his tableau, and so on and so forth until there are no cards left. You then, in that round, score the cards in front of you. Each card may have a symbol on it, and it will have something to tell you how to score the card. You go through each card and score each one accordingly. So before you start the second round, each player takes one of the cards in their tableau and sets a token on it. That card is then theirs to keep permanently in their tableau. They then gather up the other cards in their tableau and choose 1 card to discard permanently from the game. Once both players have done this, you gather all the cards, remaining cards together, plus the cards that weren't drawn from the original deck, shuffle them up, and deal out 5 new cards. You then play a second round, drafting in exactly the same way. You then score the cards at the end of the second round. Once that's done, you then choose again one of the new cards to keep permanently in your tableau, putting a token on it. Remove 1 card from the game, gather up your cards, shuffle them up with the remaining cards, and deal out 5 more. Then you score it for a last and final time, add up the total scores, and whoever has the largest score will win the game. And it is a very, very good game, I have to say. Only 18 cards. I didn't realise there would be quite the choices there are and quite the variability in gameplay each time, because obviously you're going to get different cards every time that you're shuffling up cards and dealing them out. But not only that, but the cards that you choose to keep from round to round will give you a different strategy of how to play the game. I have a sneaking suspicion that with multiple plays of the game, people will choose to keep certain cards more than certain other cards. A lot of the cards are based on having the majority of a symbol. They tend to be low scoring cards. Some of the high scoring cards will be the ones that people, I reckon, will keep, because it'll mean that throughout the 3 rounds they can play up for those gains. So for example, one of the cards, I think it gives you 15 points, 13 or 15 points, if you have one of each symbol in your set, in your tableau. And obviously if you're able to do that pretty quickly, then you'll score a lot of points very quickly. Anyway, it's a 2-player game, 18 cards, 20 minutes to play. It does play within the time limit. Thoroughly recommended. So that's all I have for you this time. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.